read from. He was a slave for the first 20 years of his life. At the age of 12, Douglas bought this book called The Columbian Orator. The Columbian Orator was a book used by the affluent families in the 1800s. Douglas took 50 cents to buy a copy. The Columbian Orator is a book that has a collection of the great writers and speakers on natural law and liberty. Cicero, George Washington's speeches in there, Benjamin Franklin. And this will help shape his worldview. This book helped shape his worldview. So Douglas had 3 books he read from while he was a slave boy. The Columbian Orator, the Dictionary, and the Bible. A lot of folks don't know that Frederick Douglass was an ordained preacher. He was an A.M.E. Zion ordained preacher. At the age of 16, the story is while Douglas was a slave, Douglas got into a 2-hour fight with a slave master. What happened was, Douglas was sent to work for a guy named Mr. Colby. Mr. Colby, by profession, was a slave breaker. Douglas was sent there by his slave master so his spirit could be broken. At the age of 16, Douglas gets into a 2-hour fight. Douglas said, I wasn't trying to hurt him. I was making sure he wasn't going to hurt me. So while they're fighting, one of the white workers came to work that morning on the plantation. And Colby hollers out, come help me, I'm fighting Douglas. Now Douglas is fighting 2 grown men. And what Douglas said was that he kicked the other guy high in the chest. I guess he broke his rib. And the guy was tumbling over to the dirt. Douglas said, I didn't see him no more. The fight continued. This time, I can't think of his, I think his name is Bill. Bill was a free man, black man, working on the plantation. Colby hollers out, come help me, I'm fighting Douglas. Douglas said to Bill, don't you get in this. Oh, Fred, I'm not going to get in it. Colby said, come help me, I'm fighting Douglas. He said, Mr. Colby, you hired me to work in the fields. You didn't hire me to fight Douglas, I see you. So he went on his business. The third person that came to work was a black female. She was actually a slave of Colby's. And Douglas said when she came, he knew it was over with. Because if she did not abide by his instructions, she was going to feel the brunt of not doing so later on. So she came to where they were fighting, did not move, did not get involved, and Colby punched her in the face. They continued to fight. Douglas said he won the fight because Douglas said, I drew blood from him, but he didn't draw any blood from me. That was a turning point in Douglas's life because after 6 months of whipping, Douglas was almost to the point of giving up on the idea of being free and wanting to escape from slavery. That was a turning point in his life because what happened? He conquered his fear. He conquered his fear by fighting Colby. I'm on page 4. Douglas' first attempt was from slave was 1836. His first attempt from slave was 1836, but somebody ratted on him, he and 2 other guys. And so 2 years later, he tried again. So 1838, in 1838, he made it good on his second escape. When Douglas escaped from slavery, he escaped from Maryland to New York. That's important because this is why states' rights and federalism is important. He escaped from the slave state of Maryland to the free state of New York. If it had not been for federalism, where could he have gone? He escaped from the slave state of Maryland to the free state of New York. Thank God for federalism. Okay? When Douglas went to New York, he changed his name. In fact, he sent for his wife. On page 4 at the bottom, that's Douglas's first wife, Hannah. That's her picture there, on page 4. So he goes to New York, he sends for Anna. Anna comes there, they get married. At that time, he took on the last name of Frederick Johnson. Johnson. And somebody came up to him and said, Frederick, we got a lot of black folks up here named Johnson. You need to find you another name. And one of the guy he was staying with was reading a poem by Sir Walter Scott called Lords of the Valley. Lords of the Valley. And in that poem, there's a character by the name of Douglas. And he said, here's a good name for it. Take on this name, Douglas. And that's why he picked Douglas as his last name. Douglas now spelled his last name with 2 S's, by the way. Not 1 S, 2 S's. Don't ever forget that. 2 S's in Douglas. So Douglas escaped 1838. 1841, Douglas, at the age of 23, he attended an anti-slavery rally. And unexpectedly, he was asked to give a speech. Unexpectedly, about his slave experience. Unexpectedly, he was asked to give a speech. But think about it. What was the book that he bought at the age of 12? The Columbian Orator, a book that teaches you how to be an orator. He was prepared. He read it every day while he was on the plantation. So at the age of 20, even though he was unsuspected, he was prepared. See how when God gives you something to do, God will not only give you the provision, but also, not the vision, but the provision to make it happen. So he was being shaped and formed, didn't even know it. So he gave this speech. William Lloyd Garrison was his mentor for a while. Douglas left William Lloyd Garrison for 3 reasons. Number one, William Lloyd Garrison and the Garrisonians, they were pacifists when it came to the issue of slavery. They believed that the best way to end slavery was through moral exhortation. In other words, the more you preach about it, the more you talk about it, sooner or later folks going to change. Douglas said no. Douglas said the best way to end slavery is through political action. Here's the relationship with Douglas and the Republican Party that folks in the Republican Party don't even know. The Republican Party was started in 1845 to end slavery. It started as a counter to the Democrat Party, 1854, 1854. 1841, 14 years before the Republican Party was started, Douglas was speaking about his experience as a slave and the need to abolish slavery. 14 years before the Republican Party was started. The Republican Party was started by abolitionists. Douglas was the face of the abolitionist movement. So he was traveling, talking to people, encouraging them as a catalyst, inspiring them to do something politically to end slavery. As a result, a political party was started, Republican Party. It was started by Charles Sumner, I believe. By Charles Sumner. Douglas is not the founder of the Republican Party. He was an advisor to the founder. Okay? Let's go on here. So when Douglas spoke, he was so articulate that William Lloyd Garrison not only hired him to be a lecturer on the anti-slavery circuit, but when Douglas spoke, he was so articulate that many people thought he was a phony, that he was, in fact, an imposter. There's no way in the world a slave can talk like this that had an extensive vocabulary. Because remember now, he was reading the dictionary while on the slave board, practicing his penmanship. He had an extensive vocabulary. There's no way in the world no Negro can talk like this. Douglas said, okay, I'm going to write a book. You think I'm a phony? I'm going to write a book. So in 1845, Douglas writes his first of 3 autobiographies. First of 3 autobiographies. His first autobiography is entitled The Narrative of the Life of Frederick Douglass. And in that autobiography, Douglas gave eyewitness accounts to all the atrocities he saw on the plantation. He gives names, addresses, county locations. When the slave master heard about that, he put a warrant out for Douglas' arrest. Well, he was already a fugitive slave. So the slave master put a warrant out for his arrest. So Douglas went to Europe for 21 months on a tour. I don't think it was a tour, but he had to flee to Europe for 21 months. Okay? To let things cool off. While in Europe, 2 sisters that were involved in the anti-slavery movement in Europe, Anna and Ellen Richardson, raised $716.96 to purchase Douglas's freedom with his slave master in the United States. The women in Europe did it, not the abolitionists in the United States. They didn't want Douglas to be free. The abolitionists didn't, because it would hurt on the marketing. Oh, look, come hear the fugitive slave Frederick Douglass speak. It was the people in Europe who raised the money to get Douglas's freedom, not in the United States. Okay? Now, do you see a connection here? Douglas's mother, the women in Europe. Women played a key role in Douglas's life. Remember now, his father was a slave master. So Douglas had no positive male role models around him. He had women and books. That was it. Now, I'm going to go to page Douglas' gifts was writing and speaking. So he owned a couple newspaper companies. One was called the North Star. Abraham Lincoln was one of the scribers of Douglas's newsletter. I say that because Douglas and Lincoln met on 3 different occasions. They met on 3 different occasions. One time, Lincoln brought Douglas in to be his advisor, to discuss with Douglas about a plan in case the North lost the war, an escape plan for the slaves to flee to the North. He brought Douglas in on that. Douglas went to see Lincoln on one occasion. Remember now, the 54th Massachusetts Infantry Regiment was a all-black infantry regiment. Douglas went to Lincoln and said, you gotta allow blacks to fight for their freedom. And when Lincoln said, okay, they can join you in the army, that's when they started the 54th. Douglas was a recruiter for the 54th. Douglas' 2 sons served in that regiment. Douglas volunteered to serve, but only on the one condition. He said, I'll serve if you commission me as an officer, because I got some management experience. And of course, they weren't going to have any black officers, so they did not allow Douglas to serve. And Douglas said, well, you got my boys, since you can't make me an officer, I just continue to do what I'm doing. Okay? I mentioned before, you heard me speak, that President Douglas was an advisor to 5 Republican presidents. 5 Republican presidents. This man never been to school in his life. He was advisor to 5 Republican presidents. Abraham Lincoln, Ulysses S. Grant, James Garfield, Rutherford Hayes, and Benjamin Harrison. Most folks will get a chance to meet one president. He was an advisor to 5 Republican presidents. 5. He was a capitalist. Douglas wrote 3 autobiographies. He was a lecturer. You know, when you think about what Douglas went through, he was I always put it this way, Douglas was a sub-0 percenter. He was born into slavery. When you're born into slavery, you're born below poverty. So he was a sub-0 percenter. He was a slave for the first 47 years of his life, first 20 years of his life. He was a 47 percenter by point. He was getting that free stuff, you know, free health care, slave master health care. Slave master health care is no different than slave government run health care. Slavery by government is still slavery. Douglas the master took care of Douglas's health care, clothing, shelter, food. I don't know if he had a cell phone, but the cell phone was out back then. He probably had one of those too. But the story doesn't end there is my point. Douglas died a 1 percenter. He had $300,000 in savings when he passed away. Douglas died a multimillionaire. Because $300,000 back then is more than $10 million today. Here's why Frederick Douglass is so important, is because we use him as our vehicle to advance the cause of conservatism. I don't care which victim category that the left will put people in, they cannot out-victimize Frederick Douglass. You can't do it. You can't do it. Frederick Douglass is the bridge over the abyss of racism and class warfare envy that's being created by the communist left. He's the bridge. On page number, if you look at page number 10, with Abraham Lincoln and the picture down to the bottom, you see Douglas sitting across from this lady that's a light-skinned lady. That is Douglas's second wife. That is not a light-skinned black woman. That is a white woman. Douglas' second wife was white. They tried to, when Douglas was asked about why he married this white woman, he said, look. My first wife represents my mother's side of the family. My second wife represents my father's side of the family. That's how he dealt with that. Because his father was white. His father was his slave master. I'm on page number 11. Page number 11 is a recommended reading list. You can take a look at that. The thing I suggest that you do is this. Before you read any biography on Frederick Douglass, read what Frederick Douglass says about himself first. Because some of these biographies I've read are not accurate. In particular here, if you read number 7, the book entitled Douglass and Lincoln, How a Revolutionary Black Leader and a Reluctant Liberator Struggled to End Slavery. Douglass never referred to himself as a revolutionist. He specifically said, I'm a reformer. Douglass said, I don't want to tear up the existing system. I just want to make it better. Those are his exact words. So it just gives you a different perspective when you read what Douglass had to say about himself. Read what Douglass had to say about himself first. On page, like I said, if you worry about me skipping, don't worry about that because the answer key is in the back of the book. I'm on page number 8. Page 8. This is a list. There are 3 quotes here I pulled up what Douglass says about the Constitution. And I said this in Jacksonville. I got to say it again because this is very important. Thank God that we have a literary legacy of the writings of Frederick Douglass to refute the lies and propaganda of the communist left. Because what I've learned is that the political insight of Frederick Douglass is more important than the political insights of the founding fathers. You heard me say that before? Y'all heard that before? Let me say it again so you don't think I said something strangely. The political insight of Frederick Douglass is more important than the political insights of the founding fathers. Again, here's why I'm saying this. The founding fathers gave us 2 magnificent documents, the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution, correct? Some of the founding fathers owned slaves. When the Constitution was ratified, that's not when they freed their slaves. The slaves were freed after the death of some of the founders. So when it comes to liberty, the founding fathers are tainted. And the left exploits that. Do they not? They exploit that. They own slaves, therefore they give us a slavery document. Correct? Now, on the other hand, Frederick Douglass did not own any slaves. He was a slave. And in his writings and his speeches, he affirmed the founding fathers and he affirmed the Constitution. And that's what the left does not have an answer for. Douglass writes with having a former slave perspective. You can't call Douglass a racist. He was the victim of racism. You can't say Douglass was an Uncle Tom or a sellout. No. He escaped from slavery, and through the Council of Lincoln, signed the Emancipation Proclamation, 4 million blacks were freed from slavery. See, he was not a sellout. So having a literary legacy of the writings of Douglass is key. So we got to pull from that. The problem I have with the RNC, they use Douglass for public relations reasons, but they don't embrace his writings. Or they give you a quote, but they don't know the substance of the quote. You got to go farther than that. You got to get into his writings. What he said about liberty and why that's important, because we can use his writing, it's his own words. And it's counter to everything that the communist left is doing and what they say about the founding fathers. That's why Douglass is key. What the Republican Party is doing, they talk about Douglass doing Black History Month. And that's it. Well, my point is this. If we're being attacked every day by the communist left, because why? They want to keep control of the narrative. If they're attacking us every day, we got to be on the offense every day. Frederick Douglass puts us on the offense. Don't just use him, embrace him. I'm not angry with the RNC because I met with Rice Priest. I'm not angry with them. I am puzzled by them. Here's why I'm puzzled. You heard of Senator Elvin Guillory, the Louisiana politician out of Louisiana, the Democrat who switched and became a Republican. You know why he switched? For over 3 years, because as a Democrat, Guillory had a very, very conservative voting record. For over 3 years, the Louisiana GOP tried to get him to switch parties. He wouldn't do it. I talked to him in 30 minutes. He decided to switch. Why? I gave him a share with the Frederick Douglass Republican message. This Frederick Douglass Republican message, that's what gave him the inspiration. I'm talking about Guillory. Gave him the inspiration and the grit to come out of the closet. If it can inspire him, a man, a politician who's in a fishbowl, you can use it on anybody. Your friends, your family members, your fellow citizens. You heard of a place called Forsyth, Georgia. Lord have mercy. You know about Forsyth, Georgia? Supposed to be so KKKK haven that one time Oprah Winfrey broadcast her show from Forsyth, Georgia. Last November, they called my organization, asked us to come there to share this Frederick Douglass message and to teach them this message. I couldn't make it because I had a scheduling conflict, so I sent my brother. That's not funny. But I actually had a scheduling conflict. Who's that laughing at me? Make a long story short is this. My brother, with my behalf, did a magnificent job. We shared with them, no, in fact, it wasn't even a training session. We just spoke. They bought copies of the book. They went through the book. In 2 months after we left, they decided they were going to put this Frederick Douglass Republican methodology of engagement into practice. In 2 months, they had inspired 6 blacks to join that local Tea Party. They didn't join as Tea Party activists, they joined as Frederick Douglass Republicans. It gets you out of the closet. It gives you cover. It gives you cover. You follow me? I know about Douglass, I just highlighted some of the things, but there's more into that workbook. Just use the answer key in the back of the book. I just want to highlight the major points because I want to spend the most of my time dealing with this engagement thing. Now, we're going to take a break, but y'all ready to keep on going? Y'all okay? Y'all want to stand up and stretch? We'll take a break. Yeah. Keep on going? All right, let me take this thing off. We're going to get busy. Okay, this is the second. I don't want to believe what's this. Okay, can you hear me? All right, you ready? Republican methodology of engagement. Why is this thing so powerful? Why does it work? And why does it work better when someone that's not a black American says, I'm a Frederick Douglass Republican? Here is the key. Here is the heart of this whole message. And don't forget this. Frederick Douglass Republican. That's the way God gave it to me. Don't change it. Don't call it Frederick Douglass Libertarian. Don't call it Frederick Douglass Patriot. I'm giving it to you the way Jehovah gave it to me. Frederick Douglass Republican. The reason why that works because that's an oxymoron. It's an oxymoron. The two just don't go together. Frederick Douglass, an icon of liberty. Because we're losing a propaganda battle, Republican, an icon of racism. Frederick Douglass, Republican. When someone hears that, when you're out here engaging, and somebody asks you, are you a conservative, what would you say? You just lost. You just lost badly. You might as well say, yeehaw. Frederick Douglass, Republican. The word conservative, Tea Party, Republican Party, those words have a negative connotation. We're losing the propaganda battle. We don't have control of the narrative. Those words are synonymous with the word racist. If you call yourself a black conservative, a Tea Party conservative, a Christian conservative, a Reagan conservative, you might as well, it's okay to say that in here, but you're out here engaging out in the community, you might as well drop that last word, conservative, call yourself a black racist, a Tea Party racist, a Reagan racist, a Christian racist. If you call yourself a constitutional conservative, because we're losing the propaganda battle, you can might as well call yourself a racist. We're losing the propaganda battle. The left has control of the narrative. They're always attacking. They must attack because they don't stand for truth. They must attack. Every day they wake up attacking. Frederick Douglass, Republican. That is an oxymoron. I used to do liberal talk shows. I don't do them anymore because I'm not invited. But when I go to any talk shows that I do, liberal or conservative, here's first thing you got to remember. This whole Frederick Douglass Republican thing it is easy, but it's not simple. It's easy to understand and grasp that it makes sense. What's not simple about it, you got to get out the closet and practice and do it. Frederick Douglass Republican. As soon as you tell someone you're a Frederick Douglass Republican, there are three things that you must say first in order to take control of the narrative. If you don't say these three things, you will be attacked and you will lose. You never get a chance to change your heart or mind. I was on a liberal show in New Orleans one time. I was a call-in guest. I was on the show for 1 whole hour. The station is so liberal, one of the shows that they air in is Errol Sharpton's show. So you know what the audience was like. I was on the show for a whole hour, and I got 4 phone calls. Do you have your own talk show? Where can I get your book? You got me thinking. Can you come to my church and share the message? Here's what you have to do. Like in the army. Write this down. When I got on that show, I knew I had to set up my perimeter. I got to take away the attack arrows that they're going to use against me. If I take them away, they're going to be listening instead of going to attack me. I am a Frederick Douglass Republican. 3 things you got to say. Number 1, that's not the same thing as Republican. The Republican Party today does not resemble the party of Frederick Douglass. And that's the case. When it was a defender of the Constitution, and it made, okay, that's number 1. Number 2, it made the plight of the poor and the working poor a legislative priority. I'm a Frederick Douglass Republican, not the same thing as Republican. We got to make the plight of the poor a legislative priority. Not in terms of entitlements for a lifetime, but to elevate the poor to become employees and entrepreneurs. Once you have the least of these, everybody else is elevated. And the last thing is this, 3rd one. We need people in both parties with a Frederick Douglass perspective. In other words, we need people with the moral courage to be truth tellers. Those are 3 things you got to say. If you forget to say one of those 3 things and they call you on it, or they ask you about it first, even though you may reply in a very strong and positive way, they think they just drew blood because they beat you to it. And the attack is on. Or the wall is up. You follow me? No matter where I go, I don't care where I am, whenever I speak, I'm on a show somewhere. K. Carl, tell me about yourself. Blah, 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 blah. I'm a Frederick Douglass Republican. That's not the same thing as Republican. See, the Republican Party today does not resemble the party of Frederick Douglass. When it was the defender of the Constitution, it made the plight of the poor working priority in terms of legislation to elevate the poor to become employees and entrepreneurs. And you know what? We need people both for the compartments with the Douglas perspective. You don't need to write this down because it's in the companion guide. If you got a copy of the book, this book, if you got a copy of the book, the companion guide comes with it, and it's in here. I'm going to talk about those two tools in a minute. That's how simple this is. That's how simple it is. So here's the psychological dynamic.